the boundaries between industries are not that clear anymore, right? You have a company that is, set out to make difficult life for the car manufacturers.
Welcome to Innovation Talks. Join us weekly as we discuss with distinguished industry guests how to refine and improve corporate innovation and new product development as businesses aim for long-term success. Hosted by Paul Heller, Sophion CTO.
If you are looking for additional information around new product development or corporate innovation, sign up for Sophion's newsletter where we share news and industry best practices monthly. The fastest way to do this is to go to sophion.com, that's SOPHEON.com, and click the sign up and stay informed box. Hello everybody, welcome to the show. Glad you could join us today. We have a very interesting guest. I'd like to introduce you to Christian Hopp. He's actually professor at the Berner Fachhochschule, and now I've said my German. It's the Bern University of Applied Sciences. He's been since July of last year. He's been heading the Methods and Tools division at the school at the university. He studied business administration in Germany and the Netherlands and the USA. He completed his doctorate in quantitative economics and finance at the University of Constance, and then he completed a master's degree in business administration at the University of Pittsburgh. That'll please the Pittsburgh people out there. There's quite a number of them listen to this podcast. And then the Rotterdam School of Management, and he got his master's in financial management. Christian, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks, Paul, for having me, and thanks to everyone, of course, for listening in. Just to the Method and Tools division sounds like this is a lot of craft work and everything. It's actually a lot of data and methods and boring stuff.
I think it's stuff I don't think it's so boring, but yeah. So where are you talking to us from? Where are you located?
I'm currently sitting in Stuttgart because, due to the lockdown, I'm currently not allowed to be in the office in Bern. We're still working remote. It's working surprisingly good, though I'm getting somewhat tired of not seeing people around. But at least we have the chance to use Teams and what kind of software you have. So it's we're hanging in there, and 4-6 more weeks, and then we might get our freedom back. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, good. I think the same here. Did you do any remote classes? Have you been teaching classes remotely during the?
Well, basically, it's kind of odd because you get to the point where you're grading people that you've never met before, that you've never seen before, that you've never seen on camera, on person. So basically, everything is remote right now. But I think it's been a great learning experience on the technical side, to be quite fair. I mean, if you would have told us 2 years ago that this is where the future lies, and this is something that we could sort of adventure into, everyone would have told you this is not going to work. But being forced doing that, it's working remarkably well so far.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what it goes back to. Do people go to the office? There's so many models being considered out there. I think you just phrased it very well. We could not have done it, but we did it because it was forced on us.
Yeah. It's a nice way of saying it.
The tools are phenomenal.
No, I think it's okay. I mean, I think on the one hand side, you kind of realize that there are a couple of things that you cherish in terms of teaching students. There are a couple of things like, if you have office hours, you can do that remote, and I think we'll continue doing that remote. But there are a couple of things, especially for new students coming in, the learning experience, the being together with others, talking about difficult exam questions and the learning together. I think this is something that is very, very difficult to do remote because you need this, the contact with the people. Yeah, so this is something that I'm looking forward to. The students are looking forward to, and I think this is sort of something that I think we've learned that it's very difficult to substitute.
Yeah, and I guess you gained an appreciation for something you had and you didn't realize how good it was.
That could well be.
Yeah. Well, Chris, how did you get involved in innovation management?
Yeah, that's sort of a long academic story that I've been around. I mean, you mentioned my PhD was in quantitative economics and finance, so there wasn't really that much in terms of innovation management. But during my PhD, I sort of accidentally ran into a data set that was on venture capital investments. And I thought that was sort of a very fascinating area. So I did a lot of research during my PhD on venture capital and, the rise of the first number of unicorns and the Googles of this world that sort of evolved from this time around. Subsequently, I was looking into sort of the entrepreneurship side. So a lot of research on business planning. Does it really make sense to have a business plan? Because at that time, everyone was talking about the lean startup approaches and just go for it, fail fast, and so on and so forth. And I was wondering why people were still writing business plans. So did a lot of research on this one to find out that actually, yes, there is a time and place for doing these type of using planning type of approaches. And then in 2013, I got a job offer to go to Aachen, and I had a lot of colleagues that were working on innovation management, open innovation, user innovation. So we basically teamed up doing a lot of research over the past couple of years in this area, which I think reflects both of the sides that I've been engaged with. The entrepreneur, the technology, and everything that comes together to make actually for a successful company in this way.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, it's amazing the relationship there. This concept of business plans is a good one. I've heard everybody say we need them. They need to be rigorous. We don't need them at all. Throw them out. Make them lean. What have you found in that area of business plans?
Yeah, the interesting thing is when you talk to academics about it, is this, yes, it gives structure, it helps to raise funding. When you talk to practitioners, they will tell you that they just issue planning. It's something that they don't really do. But when we looked at data, so we analyzed 1,200 entrepreneurs in the US and looked at when are they writing business plans, and is it like this 40-page document that sits on the proverbial shelf, or is it something that they're actually using? And we basically found that if you do planning very, very early in starting your entrepreneurship endeavors, it's not really helping. If you haven't been able to define who your customers are, what your business model is, what your business opportunity is, it's very difficult to write a business plan that is that you have to change the next week because you haven't really understood what the customers are looking for. So basically, planning very early is something that is problematic, and basically this sort of mirrors the information that we get from the practitioners as well, who said that you need to be out there, you need to be talking about your business ideas and get some feedback and test run and maybe adapt your business model at some point. But don't really write a business plan. However, upon the time when you've defined your business idea, planning makes a whole lot of sense, right? It helps you structure your ideas. It helps you to define bottlenecks, and in the end, it's also a document that VCs are still looking for. It's sort of your invite to the dance, right? I mean, you have to have it, and then at some point, if you have achieved this legitimacy, it's just a token. You don't need it anymore. So if you've come to the point where you've developed patents and the like, this is also where business planning is not really helpful. So the interesting thing was you started with something which is black and white, and then you realize it's interesting because both sides have a point. It's just the time of the planning that really matters, and it's not the plan itself, right? It's the planning, it's the learning that goes in there, that goes out there, that really makes a difference.
Yeah. Did you find any differences between big companies, small companies? Obviously, startup doesn't have to be small, but it could be a 1-person or 2-person company, and it could be a 20-person company. It could be bigger startups, can't there?
Yeah, I mean the interesting thing is the companies that we looked is really it's the broad universe of all startup activities in the US, right? It could be a mom and pop shop, it could be a restaurant, or it could be one of these the larger tech companies. The interesting thing is that high-tech companies, for example, were more likely to have a business plan, but they were also usually larger companies. So you had like 1, 2, 3, 4 founders that were involved. And to this end, a plan is also something, at least also in my teaching, this is something that I took out of my research, is that it helps to create a shared vision of the people involved. So something that I usually tell my students, If you're interested in starting a company, make also sure that you have some type of founders agreement where you write down your assumptions, where do you want to take this company, and so on and so forth, and make it before you run into trouble, because once you're in there, it's very difficult to navigate that as a team. So yeah, it was interesting to see that those companies with greater ambitions and more tech were the ones that were more likely to set up, some type of formal document, and were planning more vigorously.
Yeah, I listened to an interview. There's a radio show in America called NPR, National Public Radio. Maybe you
Hmm.
remember it when you were in Pittsburgh. They have a show called How I Built This with a guy Raz, and he interviewed the two founders of Atlassian, big software company. They were the first tech billionaires in Australia, and they said that the way they decided to manage conflict between the two of them when it was a two-person company, when they could not agree, they had a written agreement on how they would resolve any difficulty, and it was rock paper scissors. It was the game, and however it came out, that was a decision.
Yeah, that's a fair solution. It's
It
it's kind of
worked.
interesting that you're mentioning NPR, because like 3 hours ago I had a talk with Jaume Villanueva, who's at Rutgers, and we're basically talking about leveraging podcast for doing research on entrepreneurs. Because I mean, there are so many
Mm,
great stories around, and we thought that part of my research leverages big data and the like. And it's kind of interesting because people go so much into the nitty gritty of where they came from, the failures they had. I mean, it's of course their version of the world. You're not really sure if it happened that way, but at least in some way
yeah.
they convinced themselves that this is how it sort of unfolded and how it also made sense. So it's kind of interesting. I think this is a great source for also getting information, especially for the more prominent people, in terms of how they went about founding their business and what their visions and their problems were. So I
Yeah.
think it's really interesting to have these type of podcasts.
Yeah. Well, I took you off. You were talking about your research, and I took you down the path of the business case, because that's one that I know a lot of people struggle with. But are there any other interesting facts that you learned during that research?
Well, the interesting thing was, part of the research that I think was the most productive, if you will, was that we went from the business planning side. We went to sort of more understand the technology that is driving the business decisions, if you will. And one of the things that we did was like 2015, 2016. There was if you will, the advent of machine learning, artificial intelligence, analyzing large text corpora. And what we wanted to understand was what's actually the driving source behind the success of these companies. And we basically started analyzing all the research that had been done on, breakthrough innovation, radical innovation, disruptive innovation, architectural innovation, incremental innovation, what have you, just to see what the literature sort of has had to say about that. And basically had like a series of papers and numerous talks about that, also stuff in the Harvard Business Review on these issues in terms of the difference between disruptive and radical innovation. So this was
Mm.
something that sort of has been one of the cornerstones of my research for the past 4 or 5 years. And it was interesting from an academic point of view, but also interesting, I think, from a practical, practitioner point of view to this end.
Yeah, those two terms get used by laymen, by people who don't really know that well, get used so interchangeably or incorrectly. Yeah, yeah. Was there one key learning or piece of advice that comes out of that study that you'd share?
Well, you're just saying that it's difficult for the layman, but my feeling is that whenever you talk about everything is disruptive nowadays,
Yeah.
right? I mean everything you come across it could be disruptive, potentially disruptive, and so on and so forth. So I think when you Google the term, I think you get a lot of hits that have disruptive in the name. One thing that we thought was interesting, and it's sort of also how the literature and the notion of disruption was evolving, that initially it was only about the technology itself, right? So people, you could get the impression that it's technology that eats the market of a larger company, like Mark Andreessen at some point said, software is eating the world.
Right.
The interesting thing is it's not necessarily the technology itself. So the interesting thing is that some of those companies that have been disrupting markets, there was technology involved, but it was the business model that was the most crucial thing. I mean, usually with disruptive innovation, you start at the low end of the market. So the market that is underserved by the large incumbent, because they don't treat, it's not where the margins are, it's not where most of the customers are. They don't have these very exhaustive needs. So it's one thing, you kind of turn a blind eye on that side. And then if a company comes in that has a completely new business model, subsequently it's very, very difficult to change for the incumbent, because you have to turn your whole company upside down. And this is sort of the point of no return, where it's getting very difficult. And then, like the Netflix case, for example, it took ages to get Blockbuster out of the market. And it wasn't technology in the beginning. It was just a business model, the mail order business, the sending DVDs and everything.
Yeah.
But when streaming technologies became available, you had a company in place that was there was no way back. I mean, Blockbuster couldn't get rid of any of the stores. You were a brick and mortar business, and you had no way of going back. So the business model and technology, this is sort of what makes it difficult for companies.
Mm-hmm.
And also when you talk to practitioners about that, and probably also to people listening here, you always have this question of, what can I do to counter disruption? The problem is if you don't really have a good grip of your customers and the needs of your customers, it's very difficult to change your company. So this is sort of the origin of where disruption actually comes from. And I think in some way you have to be always paranoid that there is somebody who understands your customer better than you currently do. And if that's if you lose track on that, you basically open up avenues for competitors to come in.
Yeah, I would say that anybody who's doing innovation right now is in the customer experience business, but first above everything else, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think this is a great change, right? I mean, back in today's, and you can see that still for some industries that are, ripe for disruption, if you will. One of the things you realize is that customer satisfaction is actually fairly low, or if you talk to top managers, this is not one of the key priorities. And I think this is always a good indication that you're heading for trouble.
Yeah. The other use of the term disruption, which is, okay, so I'm going to disrupt an industry, I'm going to disrupt a business, my new company is going to disrupt. But the one that seems to get also talked about, and I don't know how to classify it, but it's a disruption to your business model that you didn't plan on. And we've seen, the pandemic was the biggest one, right? But there've been financial disruptions. The pandemic's a big one. Now we have a global shortage of microprocessors. These are really affecting companies, aren't they?
True. I mean, I think this is also one thing that is very important, because, I mean, disruptive innovation, as the term sort of stands in the literature, is something that is defined around your business model. Then, of course, you have these, always occurring disruptions that you have to sort of counter. And I think the interesting thing is that it's a difference between, dealing with somebody who is sort of your disruptive competitor or with disruption, because in this, with disruptions, although it's sort of a very difficult term to use, but if you have a company that has, pre-existing conditions, if you will, right? Your business model was inaccurate. You didn't really have any type of dynamic capabilities. You haven't been hiring the right people over the past years. The pandemic showed, right? If you were targeting wrong segments of the markets and so on and so forth, the pandemic basically laid everything bare. And I think this is sort of a different type of disruption here, where we're talking about organizational resilience, right? I mean, it's, you can't really vaccinate companies, but of course, I think that there are a couple of things where you realize that you have to change. Your organizational culture has to change to counter this type of disruption that is currently taking place in the market.
Yeah, and that circles us right back to the beginning comments we made about the fact that we're working remote, working from home, and that's another disruption that I think we've by and large handled well. I think people have really gotten used to it, as you said. So lots of disruption in lots of different angles.
True that.
Yeah. Well, thinking about news, what's happening? Have you seen any interesting news that's innovation related? A piece of news that you'd like to share?
considering that I spend, a lot of time on Twitter, it's very difficult, to get out of the way of Elon Musk. And I'm not talking cryptocurrencies
Yeah.
or Dogecoins here. I think one of the things, especially talking about disruption in this matter, was I was surprised to learn that Apple is currently building a large new factory and relying on Tesla batteries. Which sort of was kind of, I thought of, Tesla as disrupting the automotive industry. But I think one thing that I came to learn, I think was an article in The Verge that I read about this one. What I thought was interesting is that, the boundaries between industries are not that clear anymore, right? You have a company that is, set out to make difficult life for the car manufacturers. And I mean, I'm sitting in Stuttgart right now, so I
Yeah,
mean, when I watch my
right.
neighbors, they work for exactly those companies that are afraid of everything that Tesla might be doing. But the interesting thing is, it's not only a car manufacturer. It might also be sort of an energy company. And I think this is something that, when I think about different industries, the boundaries are getting blurred. I mean, I also thought about, what other type of industries might you have that are going to be affected by this. And I also thought about, autonomous vehicles, for example, is, yes, that's also a threat for car manufacturers. But, quite frankly, if I could go from Stuttgart to Bern and, take an autonomous car overnight, I don't need to stay at a hotel, right? I mean, I could use my car. So there are a couple of things where different industries are getting closer and closer to each other with these new type of technologies. And I think this is really interesting because, you don't necessarily have to look at your, the prior competitors, but when you look about across industry boundaries, you might see completely new companies at the horizon that you should be, looking for as competitors, or maybe, look at their business models and copy some of these ideas.
Boy, that's really interesting. As you were talking about taking the autonomous car to Bern, I was thinking of the trains, and I was thinking of in particular, the ICE trains, which have struggled as of late with their schedules, and you miss a connection, and it's a real challenge for the Deutsche Bahn to be on schedule right now, and that's going to make it even.
Yeah, and especially, I mentioned that before, like customer service is. I'm not sure how high the Deutsche Bahn ranks there, but I don't think it's one of the main priorities over the past
Yeah,
years.
yeah. Well, I don't. Hard to find many people that rank them very high. It's sad, but I know they know about it, and they've got to work on it. It's just clear. Yeah, that's very interesting. Since you mentioned Elon Musk, and I'm thinking a lot about innovation. I'm thinking about companies that, there's seems to be innovation that's driven from the top, right? There's a person, really strong leader. We had it in Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, these people who, you can go back and say it was Bill Gates, where there's just a very strong presence and drives a major corporation. And then there's big companies that have pockets of innovation, which is groups of people working in teams or cross-functionally, or, in smaller pockets, maybe trying to be a startup within a big company. Have you done any when you look at innovation in the lens of that dynamic between maybe single individual driven versus group driven from the bottom up?
Yeah, I haven't really particularly looked at these things, but I think this is sort of where two streams of my research kind of come together. Because I mean, on the one part, I was looking into entrepreneurship. On the other side,
Yeah.
we've been doing a lot on leadership as of late. So a couple of studies that look into what are the traits of leaders and what are followers looking in leaders. And one of the things that we always found interesting was, there are certain traits that you have in people. And I think when you're mentioning, Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, I think the visionary part, right? I mean,
Yeah.
what they envisioned the customer to want, how Steve Jobs eschewed every type of data and market research was clearly visionary. To be quite fair, as a leader, or if somebody could be consulting a leadership, I'm not sure if I want to take a page out of either Elon Musk or Steve Jobs' leadership book. I think this is sort of it's a completely different type of organization. Steve Jobs, even being fired from his own company. I mean, this is something
Right. Yeah.
that is very difficult to achieve as an entrepreneur. But it also tells you what type of leader he actually was. I think in terms of the inspiration, in terms of the visions that he had, but he, in a way, even for Apple, he learned that you need to have certain other people on board. I think the relationship that he had with Steve Wozniak was troubled in a way. However, the late years of Apple, when you had people like Jonathan Ives, for example, designing his products, that was a different type of relationship. And I think this is sort of where you see that, even he grew as a person. But in terms of leadership, I think some of the larger companies have more sustainable type of leadership, something that is more transformational, where this one person at the top is not that important. I mean, you can see it with Tim Cook, who has a completely different type of behavior. And I think, he has been also very, very successful over the past years, but he's exhibited a very completely different leadership style there. So I think for some of the years, it's important to have such a driving force, which I think Elon Musk is also, but it's difficult to sustain this type of leadership over time.
Yeah, right. It's fair said. I mean, he did it, Jobs did it, turned it over to Tim Cook, and Tim Cook's been very successful, but you got to plan for it too, and succession planning should be top of mind of any large company. Well, just one last question I'd like to ask, if I could, is what are you working on now that's exciting?
What am I working on now? You were planning something. I mean, I just had some talks the other days with some of my co-authors, and one thing that we're not really sure where this is going, to be quite fair. But one thing that I've been sort of pondering for the past 1 or 2 years is, let's call it inclusive research and innovation. So one of the issues that I had was, working in data science was, getting women to apply for PhD positions, to find postdocs. And I thought that this was just an issue with my chair, but I sort of come to realize, and part of it's called the Data Innovation Alliance in Switzerland. And we talked about that this is sort of a problem that is permeating everything in data science. I mean, we know we have a problem with women in tech, but it seems to be getting more and more pronounced in data science as well. AI, machine learning. It's very difficult, and I think this is something we're currently thinking about. Trying to understand why this is the case. It has been the issue in tech for quite some time, and also what the consequences might be. And I'm not talking just a simple gender issue, but really inclusion. Every type of minority that might be affected by what algorithms do in the future. And the question is, should we include these people in the design of the algorithm? Should we have research teams that are way more diverse than in the past, because they might come up with better, more customer-oriented solution, more scientifically advanced type of research? So this is something that we're currently thinking about going into, because it seems to be an issue that is, I think, important from an innovation point of view, but I think it's also important from a society point of view.
Yeah, absolutely. Very humanitarian. That's wow. That's exciting. Well, I wish you a lot of luck with that. That's really, it's a hope that takes off for you.
Yeah, I hope to do something good there.
Yeah, good. Well, we'll watch this space. Well, Christian, it's been a real pleasure speaking with you. If people want to connect with you or follow you, what's the best way? How can they find you?
Well, I think the best way is to either follow me on Twitter or LinkedIn, or send me an email if you have any questions. Just Google me, and you'll end up getting on my page.
Great. Yeah. Well, it's worth it. If you're doing some great stuff, it'll be fun to follow you. So, again, enjoyed it. Thanks for joining us, and have a great rest of your day. Well, I guess it's the evening there, but great rest.
It's an evening there. Yeah. Thanks for having me. Thanks for everyone who listened in. It's been a real pleasure.
Good. And everybody else on the phone listening, we're glad you could join us, and look forward to talking to you next time. Take care and have a great day.
Thanks for joining us this week for Innovation Talks with Paul Heller. For additional information on today's topic, check out sopheon.com, SOPHEON.com, where you will find plenty of innovation-centric content and corporate best practices. If you'd like to discuss anything with Paul or would like to get in touch with the show, email us at talks@sopheon.com.